My dearest Kethra, first contact was declared a triumph for both our peoples. My landing pod was rerouted to Newark. From orbit, Earth is everything the reports promised. Blue and green, and impossibly alive. I pressed my face to the viewport like a student on his first deep space posting. And I am not ashamed of this. It was extraordinary. Manhattan was visible from my approach vector. I recognized it immediately. The density, the towers, exactly as documented. I felt something I can only describe as readiness. I was prepared for this planet. Then my display flashed. Rerouting, Newark Liberty International Airport. That was all the information provided. I watched Manhattan continue without me as the pod banked left across the water into New Jersey. The pod landed without incident in a designated area I will describe as functional, a flat expanse of pale concrete. The smell reached me as the door opened. I cannot accurately convey the smell to you, Kethra, except to say it was present, and assertively so. New Jersey wanted to be certain I understood I had arrived, and I was already 12 minutes late. I gathered my materials, I straightened my attire. I was representing our people today. Even if our people were currently across a body of water in Manhattan and I was here, I walked into the terminal. There was a line, and I joined it. This is what one does, apparently, at the Newark Liberty International Airport, regardless of diplomatic standing, the urgency of one's schedule, or the significance of the historical moment one is currently missing across the river. I waited another 26 minutes. The agent at the desk was a compact man with the energy of someone who had made peace with his circumstances years ago. His name tag said Dennis, and Dennis looked at me, and I looked at Dennis. He looked back at his screen and asked for my passport. I presented my diplomatic credentials. Dennis examined them with the careful attention of a man who has been told this might happen someday and had not believed it until now. He typed something and waited, and he typed something else. He asked me if I had any fruits or vegetables. I told him I did not. He slowly nodded and typed again. The screen appeared to be giving him information he found neither surprising nor helpful. It says you're here with the delegation. I confirmed that I was technically with the delegation. The delegation was currently at the United Nations. I was here. Dennis seemed to find this reasonable. There was a form. The form asked if I had ever visited the United States in the last 5 years. It asked about agricultural products. It asked about the purpose of my visit. It asked if I was transporting more than $10,000 in currency or monetary instruments. I asked Dennis if the form had an option for none of these categories apply to my situation in any meaningful way, and Dennis said no, and he called someone. We waited together in a silence that I found professionally comfortable, and Dennis appeared to find spiritually exhausting. A supervisor arrived. She had read the memo. This distinguished her from Dennis, who had not. She processed my credentials efficiently, stamped something with the confidence of a person who understood that history would not wait for correct paperwork, and directed me toward the exit. She told me I would need transportation to Manhattan. I asked her what she meant, and she pointed. Outside the terminal were vehicles and men standing near vehicles. One of them found me before I found any of them. "Hey, you need a ride?" His name was never established. He was a large man in a gray jacket, with the confidence of someone who considered the airport his professional territory. He looked at me the way Dennis had looked at me, except where Dennis had been resigned, this man was opportunistic. I told him I needed to reach the United Nations immediately. He said he could do that, and he named a price. I did not know if the price was correct. I had been issued human currency before departure. I understood its purpose. I presented the bills. The man counted them out with a focused generosity as someone who wanted to make absolutely sure I had given him the right amount. I thanked him for his assistance. I have since been informed I paid approximately 3 times the correct fare. I am choosing to consider it a cultural contribution. The vehicle was large and smelled of pine, artificially so. An object shaped like a small tree hung from the mirror. Perhaps it was decorative. I am not certain. The man drove with an extraordinary commitment. I won't describe the route in detail, Kethra, because I do not fully understand what happened. There was a tunnel, but before that there was a traffic that appeared to have no cause and no solution. The man expressed his feelings about the traffic clearly and at volume. I found his honesty refreshing. Inside the tunnel, I noted we were actually beneath the river. Then, we were in Manhattan. I want to be precise about this. I have seen the documented footage. I have looked at the geography. I believed I was prepared, and I was wrong. It's one thing to know a city exists. It is another to be inside it. The scale is not in the data. The noise is not in the data. 8 million people going somewhere all at once, with a complete indifference to each other and to me. I found it remarkable. The man dropped me at the corner nearest the UN and told me to have a good one. I told him I would try. He was already gone. I was now 40 minutes late. The United Nations building is exactly as documented. I noted this because little else on this planet was. I entered through a side entrance. A security officer reviewed my credentials with more preparation than Dennis had. He found my name on a list. He made a sound I interpreted as sympathy. He directed me to the General Assembly Hall. I was 45 minutes late. Ambassador of Iraq was already speaking. I stood at the back of the hall and watched. I have heard him speak many times. He is a competent ambassador, efficient, correct. Standing in that hall, I saw him differently. The room was full. Delegates from every nation, translators in glass booths, the flags of 200 countries arranged with the careful diplomacy of people who have spent centuries arguing about this exact kind of thing. And at that podium, our people, represented officially for the first time, and I was late. I stood at the back, and I did not move for the remainder of the speech. After the speech, there was a reception. I located the delegation. Ambassador of Iraq saw me from across the room. He said nothing and did not need to. I found a position near the refreshments and represented our people quietly for the remainder of the evening. There was a moment, Kethra, near the end of the reception. The room was loud and bright and full of humans doing what humans apparently do at these events. Talking without listening, listening without understanding, shaking hands with people they will never think of again. And I felt strangely at home. I recognized this place, not the building, the situation, the careful performance of diplomacy, the management of impressions, the exhausting work of being officially present. I understood this. I thought perhaps Earth would not be so difficult after all. The delegation traveled to Washington, D.C. by train the following morning. I wish to tell you about the train, Kethra, because I think it explains something about this planet and the briefing documents did not adequately cover. From the window, New Jersey presented itself again. I had hoped it would look different in daylight. It did not. There were warehouses. There were highways carrying a huge quantity of vehicles. There were structures whose purpose I could not determine and whose condition suggested the question had stopped mattering some time ago. Then something changed. The landscape opened up. Small houses with yards, trees beginning to show their first colors of autumn, a river appearing and disappearing between the hills, children waiting at a crossing, backpacks larger than their bodies, watching the train pass with expressions of people who want to be somewhere else. I found I could not look away. Washington, D.C. arrived the way many important cities do, gradually at first and then all at once. The architecture here was deliberate, considered. A city that was designed to communicate something specific about the people who built it. I found it considerably more legible than New Jersey. The embassy was everything I had hoped it would be. I will not pretend otherwise, Kethra. After Newark, the tunnel, 45 minutes of being late, and being overcharged 3 times, the embassy was ours. The proportions were correct, the materials familiar. Small things I had not realized I was missing until they were present again. I set my bag down in my own quarters and stood very still for a moment. I told myself I was simply tired from travel. That evening, I wrote preliminary notes for my first official cultural report. I organized my materials, and I thought about my schedule for the coming weeks. I went to sleep believing I understood what was coming next. Following morning, Ambassador Varrock summoned me. I mean this precisely, Kethra. Not invited, not requested. The distinction was communicated clearly through the manner of the aide who delivered the message and the speed at which he left. Varrock's office was at the front of the embassy, large windows, beautiful furniture. He was standing when I entered. I knew the conversation would be short. He did not offer me a seat. "Varel," he said. "Ambassador," I said. "You are being reassigned." He did explain it efficiently, I will give him that. The delegation required someone in the field, embedded in human culture, observing, reporting. A cultural attaché in the truest sense. Not attached to the embassy, but to the culture itself. Living among humans, daily, firsthand. It was, he said, an important role. I asked if the decision had been made before my arrival. His answer, he just looked out the window. I was to vacate my quarters by the end of the day. I was to retain my diplomatic credentials and my communicator. I was to find my own housing. I asked if there was a budget. There was, and it was quite small. I thanked the ambassador for the opportunity. He told me to send my reports through the standard channels. He then looked back at his documents, which I meant the conversation was concluded. I then let myself out. I stood in the corridor for a moment. Kethra, just a moment. The embassy was very quiet at that hour. The proportions still correct, the material still familiar. Then I picked up my bag and I left. So that is how I came to Earth, Kethra. Not as I expected, not with the delegation, in the proper order, at the correct time, but through Newark. Through a tunnel that smelled of something like fish, through a reception where I stood near the refreshments and represented our people as best I could from that position. And then out of an embassy that was mine for exactly one night. I want you to know I am doing well. I am noting this because I am aware this letter contains information that might suggest otherwise. I am a diplomatic professional with 17 years of service. I have navigated situations considerably more hostile than this one. I am, as the humans actually say, fine. Earth is not what I expected. I was wrong about that. But from the train window, Kethra, there was a moment. The landscape opening, the trees, the rivers between the hills, autumn arriving the way it does here, slowly, then completely. Not so different from home. I am choosing to hold on to that. I have found housing. It is a house, a full home, which given the budget allocated was quite remarkable. It is in a community called Quiet Creek. Your devoted husband, Varel. P.S. I have since learned the correct fare from Newark to Manhattan is about $32. I will remember this. P.P.S. Ambassador Varrock was correct that it is an important role. I am choosing to believe this also.